Everybody. It does feel like afternoon now. In the past year it was the sun was setting and it's not. So it's a beautiful day. Welcome to the Kaput Centre. I think most of you know me, I don't have to introduce myself, but it gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Barnett of Boston College today, who is our speaker in the Kaput Centre's Interdisciplinary Colloquium series. A quick bio on Dr. Barnett. He's an associate professor in the Teacher Education, Special Education Department, in the Curriculum and Instruction Department in the Lynch School of Education at Boston College. He received his PhD in Instructional Systems Technology with emphasis on science education from Indiana University, Bloomington in 2003. He also received an MS in Physics from Indiana University, Bloomington in 1997. His interests include urban science education, educational technology, and trust building in university and school partnerships. Particularly interested in the very last one. This is something that is an ongoing challenge for a lot of our work here in building trust and building partnerships with schools. They are a key focus in a lot of the work that we do. And I don't know if you're going to be mentioning anything about that today, but I'm very interested in that. So I'm going to sit down and hand it over to Michael. Thank you for being here. And he's talking on what do career education, STEM education, and policy have in common. Thank you.
So, thank you. So, can I wonder about, I don't have to stand at a podium, right? You guys can hear me okay? All right.
Becky's in charge of the video camera, so she...
Okay, so it's primarily
not too far.
With me. All right, well, I've got my little device here, so I can control my computer, so that means I can walk around. Associated with it. Since I'm genetically incapable of standing still. For that, and folks who know me know that's definitely true. So, when I got the email about what to talk about, part of where I had spent my last year is I spent it in Washington, D.C. on sabbatical. And so I had spent a lot of time up on Capitol Hill. Basically, it's great when you spend a sabbatical in D.C. because you can go camp out and just attend everything. Because everybody eventually goes there for one event or another. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about, some things I learned there and some of the relationships that was built there associated with it. Well, I also want to kind of tell a story, because I wasn't sure of what you guys knew about the relationships between STEM, career development, policy, and how all those things interact with each other. So unfortunately, I won't be mentioning a word about trust. But you can ask me later about that. We spend a lot of time focusing on that as well. And so I wanted to see a lot of the stuff we'll focus on is that last word there, innovation, because that's a big theme that comes across over and over again in everything that we're about to see. And what I wanted to do is give us a little bit of history, because I really like history. I think if I went back again and I re-majored, I would get history major, just because it's just fun stuff, right? And historical inquiry, scientific inquiry is about the same thing. So one of the things that I have my students read is something that was published a while ago, and it has a couple of nice little quotes in here. The first one is, "The real ceiling on our productivity of new scientific knowledge and its application in the development of new products and new industries is availability of trained scientists." And it goes on and it talks about that it takes a very long time to train a scientist. So the question starts becoming is, when was this written? Let's guess. What do you guys think?
1903. It's timeless.
Yeah, it is timeless, right? And so this was by Science, the Endless Frontier by Vannevar Bush in his document to President Roosevelt about the need for science and the need for training science as education. It's a great read. It was the development of the National Research Foundation, which eventually became NSF. That happened in 1945 was when this occurred, right? And NSF was founded in 1953. But this was the basis of it, right? And then if you read the current documents on what we have today, you begin to see similar things. So as we progress, right, from 1945, we hit this, right? Made a big splash in the president's speech recently. And what that kicked off was NASA, right? NASA then kicked us off to the moon, right? And then we show up a couple of decades later. So we've gone from 1945 to the 60s, right? We survived the 60s, we maybe survived the 70s. And then here we are with this quote. our once unchallenged preeminence in commerce, industry, science, and technology innovations being overtaken by competitors. And it goes on from there. This is right from the famous A Nation at Risk, right, which showed up in 1983. Notice similar to what was being said in 1945, right, and what was happening associated with that. And the bottom part, the last part, others are matching and surpassing our educational attainment. So we're going to explore that issue a little bit and see what happens there. So one of the things that I kept running into while I was visiting all these hearings and camping out with some of the staffers and things like that last year was I kept hearing these two things, was our ability to meet the challenges and achieve the opportunities depended upon the science and engineering, right? We all know that basically to be true. And the problem is whether the U.S. is maintaining its balance and maintaining its leadership role in that component. And this ended up being resulted, right, of the publication of Above a Gathering Storm, right, in 2005, which got a huge amount of press, and it just came out with a new one in 2010, approaching Category 5. What I want to explore is that issue. And so we have maybe an emerging new world, right? The world's kind of backwards here on how you normally look at it, right? We've got the East switched with the West. Because there's a lot of data that suggests that 90% of scientists and engineers will be living in Asia in 10 to 15 years. So that has some issues, right, for competitiveness for Western powers. So the question is, what can we do about maintaining a competitive edge? And a lot of that revolves around policy and getting young people excited about science. So, as I was listening to the president's speech, right, back in January, I also had read this quote out of Science. And this was, "The future of our science and technology depends fundamentally on how we attract, train, and use scientific talents today." At the core is science and technology policy, attracting a diverse range of talents. So the question is, who would have said that? The president. Right. This was actually an article written by the Premier of China that was published in Science in 2008. It's actually a great read. The reference is down there, it's volume 322, where he lays out basically the science and technology policy that China is undergoing. And then if you read and listen to President Obama's speech, State of the Union speech, I did a sort of a Wordle map of the two. They pretty much are exactly the same. It's an interesting analysis, right? Because this is how you begin to gain leadership in the world, right? As you begin to develop patents, you begin to start creating, right, as opposed to just consuming. So let's take a little bit step back, right? So we're back to A Nation at Risk, right? That was supposed to revolutionize and change everything, right, and put us on the road to making sure that we were going to be okay, science and technology. Well, since then, there has been an infinite number of reports and articles that have come out, right? Before It's Too Late, National Commission on Math and Science Teaching. The most recent book that's come out is Expanding Minority Participation, which is an excellent read by the National Academy. Running on Empty, which if we think engagement in science is a problem, look at computer scientists, is that there's nobody majoring in computer science. Massachusetts, that if you haven't read the Massachusetts STEM plan, it's an interesting read. Right above the Gathering Storm, 1 and 2. The imagery is very nice, right? It's nice and semi-sunny in the 2005 version. Category 5 is dark, gloomy in the 2010 version. An American Imperative. This one is particularly interesting if you haven't read this. This is published by the Business Higher Education Forum, which is the Fortune 500 companies. And we'll see why that starts becoming important. And this was published in 2008. Okay? And then we've got Preparing the Next Generation for leaders. So there's an infinite number of reports that have been coming out talking about what a potential problem is. So, of course, the next question to ask is there a problem? And let's see if there is and what we can do about it. Okay. It's a pretty nuanced problem. So if you go back historically, and this is from one of the congressional reports about employment and science and engineering workforce, right? You look from 1950, right, up to 2000. It's the last point where they had the data in the report, right? Everything's going upwards, right? So Clearly, people who are studying science and engineering must be getting jobs because the number of people have gone up and gotten it, right? The population has increased dramatically, but it's still a general upward trend associated with this.